A town is full of buildings, some tall, some short, some wide, and some narrow. The buildings are flats and houses and factories and shops. They're built in streets. The streets have cars and buses and lorries driving along them. The cars and buses and the streets are full of people. In fact, there are a lot of people in a town. Do you live in a town? Mary, Mungo, and Midge live in this town. They live with Mary's mother and father in this tall block of flats. They live right at the top. There are 8 flats built on top of each other. Mary, Mungo and Midge live in the flat with the flowers growing in the window box. There's Mary, there's Mungo, and there's Midge. Mary, Mungo and Midge have a large sunny room to play in. A room full of games, picture books and toys. Mungo and Midge are on their own, for Mary isn't at home. This morning, Mary climbed up to get the toy engine from the top of the cupboard. She fell down and hurt her leg. In fact, she's in that ambulance on her way to hospital, so that her leg can be made better. Her mother is with her. I wonder how Mary is. She must be nearly at the hospital by now. Midge, be careful, or you'll fall and hurt your leg too. Look out! Oh, I've hurt my tail. You silly mouse. I've told you to be careful. Have you really hurt yourself? Yes. Well, let me see. I think I'm all right. I just wanted something to do. I keep thinking about Mary. I suppose you could play your flute. Midge likes music. So does Mungo, although he doesn't usually like listening to Midge because Midge can only play one tune. You listen. Shall we go to the hospital to see how Mary's getting on? Animals aren't allowed inside hospitals. But I suppose we could wait for her outside. Oh, yes, let's. Mary was already at the hospital. She was carried out of the ambulance on a stretcher, so that she didn't have to walk on her bad leg. It looks as though she's enjoying the ride, doesn't it? Mungo and Midge are on their way. As they live in a flat right at the top of the building, they go down to the street by lift. They have a special way of doing it. While Mungo and Midge were getting into the lift, Mary was being pushed down a long corridor in the hospital. We must remember to make sure the lift door is shut. But as usual, Midge was in too much of a hurry. He was already running through the grass and the flowers on his way to the hospital. In the hospital, Mary was taken to a doctor who looked at her leg. He thought Mary might have broken a bone in her leg, but he wanted to have a special photograph taken of it so that he could see exactly what was wrong. Midge had got to the hospital. He knew he shouldn't really go inside, but he did want to see Mary, and he wanted to see what a hospital was like inside. But how could he get in without anybody seeing him? He looked around. He he saw a man selling flowers. "Lovely flowers! Buy some lovely flowers!" Midge knew that sick people staying in hospitals liked having flowers given them, so those flowers would all be taken in. Midge hid in a bunch of red roses. He saw Mungo arrive. Mungo was looking for Midge, but Midge went on hiding because he knew Mungo would stop him going into the hospital. Mary was having a photograph taken of her leg. It was a special photograph called an X-ray. It showed the inside of her leg so that the doctor could see exactly where the bone was broken. Can you see? There's just a very small crack in the bone. Now the doctor knew where to mend it. In the meantime, a woman had bought the roses Midge was hiding in. She walked into the hospital. Midge was inside at last. Now, where was Mary? The woman with the flowers walked down the long corridor. When they got to the end, Midge jumped to the floor and looked round one of the doors. He saw a room with a man in a white coat standing beside a boy in a special chair which went up and back. Midge thought this was very interesting. The boy sitting in the chair had to open his mouth, and the man looked at his teeth. The man was a dentist. "Mary has come to have her leg mended, not her teeth looked at, so she won't be in here." The next room Midge looked into was a ward full of beds. There was a man in each bed, and Midge couldn't see Mary anywhere. The men weren't well and had come into hospital to be made better. Midge ran back along the corridor. He saw the X-ray room, and there was Mary. Her leg had been put into plaster so that the broken bone would be held together until it mended. Mary was very surprised when Midge jumped onto her knee.
"Midge, what are you doing here? I'm just going to have my leg photographed again to make sure the broken bone is joined properly. Is Mungo here too?"
But Midge didn't answer. He was far too busy looking up at the X-ray camera to see how it worked. Actually, Mungo was still waiting outside the hospital. He was beginning to feel rather sleepy. Back in the X-ray room, the doctor looked at the new photograph. "Mary's bone is all right. But what's this? It looks like an X-ray of a mouse. A mouse in a hospital? This will never do." But Mary put Midge into her pocket before anyone saw him. As it was quite late and past Mary's bedtime, the doctor said Mary could stay in the hospital for the night. She and Midge were taken to a ward full of boys and girls. Mary's mother took Mungo home. She was going to come back for Mary the next day. A nurse put Mary to bed and made her comfortable. She took her temperature. That was all right. Midge sat on the blanket and took his temperature. He only had a finger to do it with, but it looked all right to him. Then a doctor came and held a sort of tube to Mary's chest. The other ends of the tube were in his ears, so that he could listen. He was listening to Mary's heart beating. "Good," he said. But then Midge crept up to see what the tube was. The doctor was very surprised. "Good gracious, it sounds like a mouse. We can't have a mouse in here. This ward is for children only. Catch it, nurse." In the end, the doctor decided that Midge must have gone outside. But he hadn't. He was hiding behind Mary's pillow. Mary's leg felt a bit stiff and strange, but she knew she would have to get used to it until the bone mended. And when her supper arrived, she felt much better. Mary gave Midge a little bit of biscuit. Then Midge had a good look round the ward. There was a boy over there in bed reading, and a girl listening to the radio. She had earphones on, so that she was the only one who could hear it. There were some children out of bed playing on a table. Midge went over to have a look. They were doing a jigsaw puzzle. There was a baby crying in a cot. Midge picked up its rattle and shook it. The baby stopped crying and laughed. Midge watched a nurse giving a boy some medicine to make him better. Midge thought the medicines looked very exciting, but even he knew that you must never take anything out of a medicine bottle without being told. Then it was time for all the children to settle down for the night. Everything was quiet now. One of the nurses stayed there to make sure everybody was all right. Mary shut her eyes, and when Midge was quite certain that she was asleep, he went to sleep too. After breakfast next morning, Mary got ready to go home. Her mother had come to get her. But first the children in the ward drew pictures on Mary's plaster. They drew with coloured pencils, because the nurse said that if the plaster got wet, it would crumble away, and Mary's leg wouldn't get better. Mary had a bright red sock over her toes to keep them warm and dry and clean.
Goodbye, Mary. Goodbye. Goodbye.
When Mary got home, Mungo was waiting for her.
Hello, Mungo. How are you?
How are you, Mary? Can you walk with all that plaster on your leg? So Mary tried to walk. It was hard at first.
Oh, it does feel stiff and funny.
Midge pretended he was in plaster too. Oh, ah, oh, ooh. Mary got better and better at walking. So did Midge. Midge drew a picture of himself on Mary's plaster. And Mungo made his paw mark. After some time, Mary's leg was better. Her mother took her back to the hospital to have the plaster taken off. While she was away, Midge had one of his ideas. He made himself a sort of bed and pretended to be very ill.
Oh dear, I feel terrible. Dr. Mungo?
Yes, Midge.
Dr. Mungo, I think you'll have to take an X-ray photograph of me.
We haven't got an X-ray machine, Midge.
Then you must listen to my heart to make sure that it's still beating.
Oh, very well, Midge. Yes, well, it sounds all right to me.
And now, you must bring me a nice supper, because even ill people have to eat.
Huh.
Hello, boys. Look, the plaster's all gone, and my leg's quite well again.
Oh, I am glad, Mary. Now you can look after me. Mungo's a very good doctor, but he's not much good as a nurse.